Good afternoon, students. In today's session, we are going to discuss variables. So, what is variable? As we can guess, or like name suggests, something that varies, something that can take different values, that can change values or different values. So, it is variable that varies, that takes up different values. So, variable is a concept which can take on different quantitative values, for example, height, weight, income, age, etc. But the main focus of the scientific study is to analyze the functional relationship of the variables. So, a variable is a quantity which can vary from which can vary from one individual to another. The quantity or the value which can vary from person to person. Variable is a property that taken on different value. This definition is given by Karlinger. It is a concept or abstract idea that can be described in measurable terms. In research, this term refers to the measurable characteristics, qualities, traits, or attributes of a particular individual, object, or situation which is being studied by the researcher. So, a variable is an entity that can take on different values. So, what does that mean? Anything that can vary can be considered a variable. Like I told you, height can vary. Height of people will definitely vary. We cannot be at same height. So weight will vary. Income will vary. One income group, second income group, lower income, higher income, average income group. So they will take on different values. So a variable is an entity that can take on different values. So what does that mean? Anything that can vary can be considered a variable. Anything that can vary can be considered a variable. For instance, age can be considered a variable. Why? Because age group will vary. Age can take different values for different people or for the same person at different times. Similarly, height can be considered a variable because person's height can be assigned a value. So a variable is a concept or abstract idea that can be described in a measurable terms. A variable is a concept or abstract idea that can be described in a measurable term. In research, this term refers to the measurable characteristics like qualities, traits, or attributes of a particular individual, object, or any situation being studied by the researcher. So variables are properties or characteristics of some event, object, person that can take on different values or amounts. Variables are properties, characteristics of some event, object, or person that can take on different values or amounts. So variables are things that we measure, control, or manipulate in research. Variables are things that we measure, control, or manipulate in research. Something that we measure, control, or manipulate in research. They differ in many respects, mostly like role they are given in our research, role they are assigned in our work, and in the type of measure that can be applied to them. So variables are the things that we measure, control, or manipulate in research. They differ in many respects. They differ in many respects, like the role they are given in our research work, in the type of measures that can be applied to them. By itself, by itself, the statement of the problem usually provides only general direction for the research study. They provide only a general direction for your research work. It doesn't include all the specific information sometimes which is needed. So there is some basic terminology that is extremely important in how we communicate specific information about research problems and about research in general. We will understand with the help of an example. If a researcher is interested in the effects of two different teaching methods, if a researcher is interested in finding out in studying the effects of two different teaching methods on the science achievement of 7th grade students, the grade level is constant. In this example, the grade level is constant because all individuals involved involved are in 7th graders or 7th grade. This characteristic is the same for everyone because they all are in 7th grade. All individuals involved are 7th graders. So this characteristic is the same for everyone. So it is a constant condition of our research study because they all are in 7th standard. So this is a constant condition of our research study. After the different teaching methods have been implemented, the 7th grade students involved would be measured with a science achievement test, and it is very unlikely that all of the seventh grade students would receive the same score on this test. It is almost impossible. No, not even no 10 students can score same marks. So it is very unlikely that all the students or all seventh grade students would receive the same score on this test. Hence, the score on the science achievement test becomes a variable because this will vary from student to student. So it becomes variable in our study. Hence, the score on the science achievement test becomes a variable because different individuals will have different scores in science achievement test. And at least not all individuals will have the same score. There may be two or three students who can obtain same marks, but it is very unlikely that all students will score the same marks. So science achievement is a variable, but specifically that the score on the science achievement test is a variable because it is going to vary from student to student. There is another variable in the preceding example. What is that? The teaching method, because it will vary from teacher to teacher. In contrast to the science achievement test score, which would be measured on a scale with many possible values. Teaching method is a categorical variable consisting of two categories, means two methods. Thus, we have different kinds of variables and different names or classification for them. So, a concept which can take on different quantitative values is called a variable. Remember, a concept which can take on different quantitative values is called a variable. A concept which can take on different quantitative values is called a variable. As such, the concepts like weight, height, income are all examples of variables. And anything, not only height, weight, income, anything that will vary, anything that can take on different quantitative value. So qualitative phenomena or the attributes are also quantified on the basis of the presence or absence of the concerning attributes. Age is an example of continuous variable, but the number of male and female respondents is an example of discrete variable. Types of variables. There are many classification systems, but they describe the roles that variables play in the research study. The variables that are the most useful are discussed as: first is independent variable. Independent variable. Independent variables are variables which are manipulated or controlled or changed. Independent variables are variables which are manipulated or controlled or changed. What are independent variables? Independent variables are variables which are manipulated, controlled, or changed. So, independent variables are variables which are manipulated, controlled, or changed. So, in the example, a study of the effect of teachers' praise on the reading achievement of primary students. A study on the effect of teachers' praise on the reading achievement of primary school students. The effect of praise. The researcher is trying to determine whether there is a cause and effect relationship between these. So the kind of praise is varied to see whether it produces different scores on the reading achievement test. So we call this a manipulated independent variable. Means this is treatment variable. The amount and kind of praise is manipulated by the researcher. The amount and kind of praise is manipulated by the researcher. The researcher could analyze the scores for boys and girls separately to see whether the results are the same for both the genders. Means we can conduct this study, or means we can study it on the basis of gender, whether male students, what is the effect on male students of teachers praise on their reading achievement, what is the effect of teachers' praise on the reading achievement of female students? So we can study such things. The amount and kind of praise is manipulated by the researcher. The researcher could analyze the scores for boys and girls separately to see whether the results are the same for both the genders. Whether the results are same for both the genders. In this case, gender is a classifying or attributes independent variable. So in this case, what is gender? Gender is a classifying or attribute independent variable. Classifying or attribute independent variable. The researcher cannot manipulate gender but can classify the children according to gender. Definitely, researcher cannot manipulate gender but can classify the children according to gender. Next is dependent variable. What are dependent variables? Dependent variables are the outcome variables and are the variables for which we calculate statistics. The variables which changes on account of independent variable is known as dependent variable. What is independent variable? The variable which changes on account of independent variable is known as dependent variable. So the variable which changes on account of independent variable is known as dependent variable. Again, we will understand with the help of an example. We will understand with the help of an example. A study of the effect of teachers' praise on the reading achievement of fifth grade students. A study of the effect of teachers' praise on the reading achievement of fifth grade students. The dependent variable is reading achievement. Effect of what? Teachers' praise. So it depends on teachers' praise. Dependent variable is reading achievement of students. So we might compare the average reading achievement scores of fifth graders in different praise conditions, such as no praise, oral praise, written praise, and combined oral and written praise. This example further illustrates the use of variables and constants. In a study conducted to determine the effect of three different teaching methods on achievement in elementary algebra, each of three ninth grade algebra sections in the same school, taught by the same teacher, is taught using one of the methods. Both boys and girls are included in this study. Both boys and girls are included in this study. The constants in the study are grade level, school, and teacher. This assumes that, except for method, the teacher can hold teaching effectiveness constant. The teacher can hold teaching effectiveness constant. So the independent variable in the study are teaching method and gender of the student. Teaching methods has three levels that arbitrarily can be assigned to different methods. For example, ABC. Gender of the students, of course, has two levels. So achievement in algebra is as measured at the end of the instructional period is the dependent variable in this study. The terms dependent and independent variable apply mostly to experimental research where some variables are manipulated, controlled, and in this sense they are independent from the initial reaction patterns, features, intentions, etc. of the subject. Some other variables are expected to be dependent on the manipulation or experimental conditions. So they depend on what the subject will do. They depend on what the subject will do in response. Somewhat, somewhat contrary to the nature of the distinction, these terms are also used in studies where we do not literally manipulate independent variables, but only assign subjects to experimental groups based on some pre-existing properties of the subject. So independent variables are those that are manipulated, whereas dependent variables are only measured or registered. Now I will tell you some examples of independent and dependent variables. For example, a study of teacher-student classroom interaction at the different levels of schooling, like at primary level, middle level, or at higher level. So, study of teacher-student interaction, nature of teacher-student classroom interaction at different levels of schooling, preschooling, primary schooling, middle schooling, or senior secondary level. So, independent variables in this study, what will be independent variable? Can you think for a minute? Yes, independent variable will be level of schooling. You cannot change it. Four categories. You can take up any category: primary, upper primary, and secondary and senior secondary. Dependent variable: score on a classroom observation inventory, which measures teacher student interaction. Comparative study of the professional attitudes of secondary school teachers by gender. A comparative study of the professional attitudes of secondary school teachers by gender. What will be independent variable? Definitely, obviously, gender of the teacher, which is male and female. Obviously, it will be gender. Dependent score on a professional attitude inventory. Next is extraneous variable. Independent variables that are not related to the purpose of the study. Remember, independent variables that are not related to the purpose of the study but may affect the dependent variable are termed as extraneous variable. Independent variables that are not related to the purpose of the study but may affect the dependent variable are termed as extraneous variables. Suppose the researcher wants to test the hypothesis that there is a relationship between children's gains in social studies achievement and their self concept. Listen again. Suppose the researcher wants to study or wants to test the hypothesis that there is a relationship between the children's score or gains in social studies achievement and their self concept. Relationship between children's score or gains in social studies achievement and their self concept. So in this case, self-concept is an independent variable, and social studies achievement is a dependent variable because it depends on self-concept. So intelligence may as well affect the social study achievement, but since it is not related to the purpose of the study undertaken by the researcher, it will be termed as extraneous variable. So intelligence is extraneous variable here because it is not a part of our study. It is not related to the purpose of our study undertaken by the researcher, but it will be termed as a extraneous variable. Whatever effect is noticed on dependent variable as a result of extraneous variable is technically described as an experimental error. So a study must always be so designed that the effect upon the dependent variable is attributed entirely to the independent variables and not to some extraneous variable or variables. Effectiveness of different methods of teaching social science. Variables such as competence, teachers' level of enthusiasm, age, socioeconomic status also contribute substantially to the teaching learning process. It cannot be controlled by the researcher. So the conclusion lacked incredibility because of extraneous variable. Intervening variable. They intervene between cause and effect. That's why they are named as intervening variable. It is difficult to observe as they are related with individual feelings such as boredom, uh, fatigue, excitement, etc. At times, some of these variables cannot be controlled or measured but have an important effect upon the result of the study as it intervenes between cause and effect. Though difficult, it has to be controlled through appropriate design. For example, effect of immediate reinforcement on learning the parts of speech. Effect of listen again. Effect of immediate reinforcement on learning the parts of speech. Immediate reinforcement. Effect of what? Immediate reinforcement given in the classroom by the teacher on learning the parts of speech by the students. So factors other than reinforcement such as anxiety, fatigue, motivation may be intervening variables because they are difficult to define in operational observable terms. However, they cannot be ignored and must be controlled using appropriate research design. Next, moderator. What is moderator? A third variable that, when introduced into an analysis, alters or has a contingent effect on the relationship between an independent and a dependent variable. A third variable, when introduced into an analysis, alters or has a contingent effect on the relationship between an independent and dependent variable. A moderator variable is an independent variable that is not of primary interest, that has levels which when combined with the levels of independent variable of interest produced different effects. For example, the researcher designs a study to determine the impact of the length of reading passages on the comprehension of the reading passages. The design has three levels of passage length: 100 words, 200 words, and 300 words. So the participants in the study are 4th, 5th, and 6th grade students. Suppose that the three grade levels all did very well in the 100-word passage, but only the 6th grade did well in the 300-word passage. This would mean that successfully comprehending reading passages of different lengths was moderated by grade level. In our next session, we will cover hypothesis, a very important topic in research methodology. Hypothesis.